chainsaw down. There's no clean cut to this thing. And I honestly don't know what would blunt force an oak tree down. It still doesn't convince me that you have a dragon.
Yeah.
And the fact that I can't on the spot explain what happened to your oak tree doesn't convince me that you own a dragon. And it doesn't convince me that your claim of causation of that dragon is correct. And this is part of, I think, what gets me about argument from ignorance, is the idea that if I can't explain those trees, that means your dragon story's true. And it's like, no, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. It means I have trees that are knocked down, I don't know how it happened, and I have somebody claiming it's something that I'm not even sure exists. And so I have a mystery on my hands, but I'm certainly not looking at that as evidence that a dragon exists.
Yeah, and that's something that comes up quite a bit, even in emails. You've had emails to this effect, and so have I. We've talked about them before in the past. By the way, argument from ignorance, we're not, for
Right.
clarity, it's not that you're stupid. It's a particular logical fallacy that assumes that an explanation is correct as long as it hasn't been disproved, or an alternate explanation hasn't been proved. And we get emails from people saying, well, I understand what you guys are saying and you seem reasonable, but I had this thing happen to me 23 years ago, and can you explain this? No. Or can you explain it in any way other than God? I could probably come up with something, but I have no idea what the explanation for that is. I'm not even sure that it happened in the way that you're reporting it, because it's 23 years ago and you were 7 and your memory is not exactly pristine. Some of the things that I've done to 7-year-olds with magic tricks and stuff, right, they're going to misremember.
Right.
And 23 years later, I walked on water instead of just drinking it. But the fact that we get so many of these where people, they feel justified. It's that old adage about the conclusion is the point where you stopped thinking. You stopped investigating, you stopped looking for other explanations, you gave up and you said, this is just unexplained, I can't come up with anything, but this guy says that it was because of God, and you know what, screw it, that's a good enough explanation for me, so I'm just going to go with it until somebody proves me wrong. And you feel reasonable. You're wrong, you are not in any way being reasonable. What you are doing is ending your frustration at not knowing with a pacifier.
Right. And I wanted to point out, too, that the argument from ignorance, one of the things that interests me about that is the consistent claim that we hear that atheists are arrogant for refusing to accept that it could be the dragon that knocked down the trees. That somehow that's an arrogant statement to say, I just can't accept that a dragon knocked those trees down. I don't know what caused it, but until a dragon becomes part of the bin that includes the existent items, I don't think we can consider it as a cause. If we were going to put the dragon forward as a cause, we need to show that there are such things as dragons, and then we can talk about whether or not a dragon knocked your tree down. But in the face of being called arrogant for that, what I find interesting is that the person that's calling me arrogant is basically saying that if they don't know the answer to something, a God must be responsible for it. That there's no way that they could be personally ignorant, or that they could be, that either mankind or an individual human being could be unaware of how something functions or the explanation for something, and those things must just be eternal mysteries from God, as opposed to things with explanations that we haven't figured out yet or that we don't have an explanation for yet. I see that as extremely arrogant.
Yeah. And I guess we'll save that other bit that we talked about.
That's just a small thing. So we've got calls.
For fun.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and start taking calls. As a reminder, after the show is over, we get together for dinner at El Arroyo. We're still working with kind of makeshift CG stuff. So it's actually, if I do this, then you can actually see the Atheist Experience. There's the number at the bottom of the screen. It is a live call-in show. We're happy to take your calls. But if you don't get through on the phone today, you can email tv@atheist-community.org, and that goes to myself, the co-host, and many of the people behind the scenes as well. Obviously, we can't possibly answer all the email that comes in, but we do read them, and we do try to answer quite a lot of them, actually. And we work as a team, so Tracy will get on a on a bender one day and answer like 40, and Jen will answer some, and then Jeff and Russell and me and Martin and Jen, and then there's some that are still going to fall through the cracks. But we do appreciate the feedback. And on that note, let's go ahead and take Joey in Tennessee.
Yeah, hi.
How you doing, Joey?
I'm doing good. I really love you guys' show, and I just
Thank
want to
you.
say you two are by far my favorite hosts.
Oh,
No offense to the other guys.
Then it's your day. Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, my question is, I'm an atheist, and I have lots of friends that are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to, just proselytize to them or be confrontational about, what I believe or what they believe. But every time I, try and talk to them about reason and logic and, trying to find the truth, I just feel like, I just want to bring up the fact that if they're not an extremist or a fundamentalist, basically they're going to hell because, by their definition of, what constitutes heaven or hell. And I find it really hard to, try and talk to them without being confrontational and saying, look, you're working on a Sunday, you should be stoned to death. And I was looking for any advice you could give me about that.
I mean, yeah, I personally don't. I generally only approach conversations like that when people bring them up with me. I don't proactively look for mechanisms to insert what I think about what they're doing. If they were to initiate a conversation with me about their religion, I would oblige that. But it does sound a little confrontational to me. I mean, I wouldn't like, I guess, if I had a religious relative and every time I did something they were inserting their religious views into my life. I would get tired of that pretty quickly. So I don't know if I'm understanding correctly what you're describing, but it almost sounds like that's what you're describing that you're doing.
Yeah, and you can actually, I won't give you the number, obviously, but you could call my mom or some of my other relatives, and you would find out that by and large, I don't ever bring these subjects up. We do the show as a way of informing people, and I will answer tons of email, and I'll run around and speak on it, but it's not like I go door to door, and it's not like I try to accost any of my religious family members or friends. But to the specific point that you're talking about with regard to hell, it's worth noting that especially moderate and liberal Christians, they've got this ability to they've departed from the orthodox views, and they've found a way to rationalize or justify their position within their own mind. Billy Graham, for example, doesn't believe in a literal hell, and has said so, and of course, the more fundamentalist sects have called him out on this, and there's not a single point of doctrine within the Christian religion that isn't contested by one denomination or another, right down to the divinity of Jesus. So it may be the case, I mean, you can argue that, if you're not a fundamentalist by your own beliefs, you're going to hell, but I think it's better to actually talk to them about what they believe and why, and find out what their particular view is on this, because there are plenty of believers out there who don't hold those fundamentalist views and wouldn't say no. I don't think anybody's going to say, according to my beliefs, I'm going to hell. Essentially, you're making an argument from a particular literalist interpretation of some aspects of the Bible, and they're looking at other aspects in a different light. So to me, it's like it's like a conversation that almost has no place, because you are coming in as a non-Christian to tell them that their particular view of Christianity is invalid. And trust me, I completely understand, because I've had go-rounds on the show and an email with liberal Christians, but what I end up trying to do is I want to find out what their views are on the Bible and what the Bible has to say and particular passages. Because if you can point out the explicit contradiction, then you might be making headway. Anything short of that, and you're just an obnoxious ass who is trying to impose your particular view on what they happen to believe.
Another
Right.
And I've been both the
Another
ass
thing,
and-
well, the other thing is sometimes people will write to us and say they want to talk to a relative about their religion, and they'll say, how do I do this? How do I approach this? And I just tell them, honestly, you ask the person straight up, can I talk to you about your religious views? And if they tell you yes, then you can talk to them, and you can talk to them for as long as they agree to talk to you. But when a person doesn't want to talk about something, you have got to respect that.
Yeah, and it's, I had a back and forth in the past week with a pastor at a church, or actually mostly a fourth, but because some people are either so uncomfortable with their views or are so afraid of confrontation that they were sending anonymous mails. I got it, or Beth got it. I find that, I even quoted the Bible verse in 1 Timothy where, you're supposed to be forthright about and honest and straight up in your defense of Jesus. But if they're looking at another verse, they might be looking at the do unto others verse. And maybe they would prefer that these types of things be handled anonymously. So you've got no way of spinning this to expose their failings, because they've already rationalized their position to the point that it's defensible to them.
Yeah. So it's like you're not presenting you're not presenting their view of it, and you're not even presenting your view of it. You're kind of saying there's people over here that look at it this way that would condemn what you're doing, and I'm pretty sure that they would say that they don't agree with those people.
Yeah, just talk to them. Just talk to them about the things that they want to talk to them about. Get some definitions. Try to expose the obvious contradictions, but try and avoid becoming an angel's advocate, I guess, for a different interpretation from theirs. It's fun sometimes, and I realize that I have done exactly this in conversations, but my point is to use that to find out those contradictions, to find out what they do and don't believe, because oftentimes they're not going to tell you, and oftentimes they don't completely understand themselves what they believe.
Well, the other thing is you will get you should get a feel when you throw something like that out there of how the person takes it.
Yeah.
Like, is this a person who's amenable to that conversation, that they're willing to talk about it and say, well, that's an interesting thing that you're bringing up, here's how I look at it? Or is it somebody that gets annoyed by it? And if it is, I don't think I would keep doing it.
Thanks a lot for you guys' help.
Sure.
All right, thanks, Joey. Appreciate it.
Hey.
We got Jackson in Tennessee as well. It's like Tennessee Day. Are you there? Jackson, you there?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Yeah, it's kind of like Tennessee Day. Actually, we were going to call and talk about the same thing, me and Joey. So it's even a stranger in that sense. But
evidently, there's some goings on in Tennessee, which, by the way, is where the anonymous letter came from. So hey.
No, I don't know anything about any anonymous letters, but I'm in a predicament like he is, except it's a little different because it's not just some person, who on the street you pass and just like, oh, I believe in God, all this stuff. I'm an atheist, and I was a Christian for 22 years, and now I was started a relationship with a woman as a Christian, and she is Christian, and now I've kind of woken up, and I've watched a lot of your shows, and I appreciate you guys doing what you do.
Thanks.
And, it's gotten to that point where it's very hard to live with someone, that is, the basis of their beliefs is just different than yours, you know what I mean? And I just don't, it's so defensive that it's like walking on eggshells around this person. And it's not something that, you want to kind of avoid, but it's something that needs to be discussed. But the person that I'm, with, I love, and I don't want to lose, and I just feel like every time that I want to express myself and my views and what makes sense to me, she gets so defensive, even if it's something small, like pointing out something like insufficient, like, well, why do you think hell exists, or why something small, like, and I just don't know how to get past that defensive barrier to where they just react in such a negative way, and it's just